Good morning. My name is Youssef Nasr. I am a research assistant at the University of Ottawa's Institute of Mental Health Research at the Royal. I'll be presenting our abstract titled The Influence of Anti-Epileptics in Repetitive Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation for the Treatment of Major Depression, a Preliminary Analysis. Specifically, we're located in the Neurostimulation Lab, or NEST Lab for short, at the Royal, whose PI is Dr. Sarah Tremblay. We have nothing to disclose. So just a little bit of background, kind of stemming to the motivation of why we wrote this abstract, that being that previous literature has suggested that anti-epileptic medication use may actually influence the ability to induce long-term potentiation like plasticity in the brain. And linked to this, anti-epileptic usage may be associated with poor clinical response when treating major depressive disorder using repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. In the third box, we've just listed the anti-epileptic medications that are of interest. And since this is a pilot study, we only had 8 participants who were on anti-epileptic medication. And I've listed in yellow the number of participants taking each medication. We're conducting a prospective naturalistic study comparing unilateral and bilateral RTMS, the unilateral condition being a ITBS protocol applied to the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and the bilateral condition being a CTBS protocol applied to the right DLPFC and an ITBS applied to the left DLPFC. And we can see just a little diagram on the right explaining this. So we compared Hamilton Depression Rating Scale and Montgomery-Åsberg Depression Rating Scale scores of participants at their initial baseline screening to their scores at the end of acute treatment, that being either week 4 or week 6, depending on the degree of response. If a participant hit remission at week 4, then his acute treatment phase would end at week 4. If they have a clinical response, but not quite at remission, we'd add additional 2 weeks to week 6, and that would then be the end of acute treatment. Here in yellow, I've just defined what clinical response and remission are. Clinical response being a equal to or less than 50% reduction in symptom severity as measured by the mean HDRS score after acute treatment. Remission being a HDRS score equal to or less than 7 after acute treatment. So 46 participants were included in the analysis, that being 8 that were taking anti-epileptic medication and 38 that did not have any anti-epileptics in their medication regime. Here are results. So in the first bullet point for both groups, we can see the difference between baseline and end of acute treatment scores, specifically the HDRS and MADRS score. We can see it's negative because on average, participants do have a clinical response or a decrease in depression based off of HDRS and MADRS scores. Something to note is that 22 of the 38 non-anti-epileptic medication patients, or 58% of them, had a clinical response. 18 of the 22 went into remission, or 47%. 7 by week 4, the remaining 11 by week 6. Something interesting is that when we look at the anti-epileptic group, 6 of the 8, or 75%, had a clinical response, and all 6 actually went into remission by week 4. We performed paired t-tests, and we found no significant difference between both groups for HDRS and MADRS scores. So our take-home message from this pilot study would be that these preliminary findings are suggestive that anti-epileptic medications do not decrease the efficacy of RTMS in terms of clinical response based on the HDRS and MADRS scales. And for future direction, more studies are needed comparing the clinical effectiveness of RTMS in treating major depression with concomitant anti-epileptic medication use. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. I've listed my email if you have any questions or would just like to know more about what we're doing at the NEST Lab. Thank you and have a great day.